gave him the questions. All right. Oh, we're live.
Okay, so here we go. Are we live?
Yep, we just went live right now. Give
Okay.
people in here, respond to those notifications. Perfect timing. The doctor and I both just retrieved our glasses of water.
Yes.
Yeah, all right, everybody. We see we have got a few takers. A few people are watching. Thank you so much for tuning in to another live stream produced by the First Tuesday Conservatives, presented by Alpha News. I'm your host, Kyle Hooten. Today, we're joined by Dr. Bob Hamilton, a pediatrician based out of Santa Monica. He's the author of a book, The 7 Secrets of the Newborn. He also hosts a podcast of his own, The Hamilton Review, where kids and culture collide. You may also recognize him from a very viral YouTube video he posted a few years back that still gets views about how to hold a newborn. Dr. Hamilton, thank you so much for being with us.
Kyle, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Absolutely. So obviously we're here today to talk about your thoughts about kids and the coronavirus and your experience dealing with big tech as you've spoken out on this issue. Provide for us a little bit of background about your thoughts on children and this virus.
Sure. Well, first of all, let me say one thing, Kyle, first of all, it's a pleasure to be here with you guys. I'm very honored for the opportunity to share with your group. I'm a general, just as a background, I'm a general pediatrician in Santa Monica. I've been in practice for 35 years here in Santa Monica. I am been married for 47 years to my lovely wife, Leslie. We have 6 kids. We have 9 grandchildren. We have number 10 coming soon. So I got my hands full, believe me. And for all you people back there in Minnesota, I want you to know that my mother, God rest her soul, was a Minnesotan. She came from a little town, northern Minnesota, not too far from Bemidji. And so I have been to Minnesota. I love Minnesota. And I will tell you that right now, according to Scott and Manya Netzel, who you all know, the temperature is beautiful. It's a lovely day in Minnesota. And I am bummed out that I'm not there with you. So I want you to know that. So anyway, regarding a couple of things I'd like to share with you in terms of like kids and COVID. Let me say actually a handful of things. I'd like to share briefly with you guys, and Kyle cut me off at any moment, but I'd like to share a little bit about kids and COVID and also kids and going to school. And then the third thing I'd like to share briefly is a little bit about the cancel culture and what we're dealing with in US today, which should concern everybody. First of all, kids and COVID, the truth be told is that kids are, COVID, by the way, listen, this is a serious infection. All of us know that, and I'm sure that many of the people listening right now have either had direct contact or indirect contact with COVID-19, because a lot of people in this country have now been infected. And I know for me in my practice, for example, we've had a handful of children who've had COVID-19, certainly many families. We've had friends, and even one of my children has had COVID as well, she and her husband. So this infection has really struck home. And I'm sure, Kyle, is that true back there in Minnesota?
Absolutely, it is. In the beginning, everybody was asking, do you know somebody who's been infected with COVID? And the answer was no. But now those numbers are creeping up, and well, the death rate still remains low. People now know people that have been infected with the virus. Yes.
Correct. And the reality is that is true. And I think that we all have to be, we have to be mindful of it. Listen, we're speaking today, the day after our president went home from Walter Reed who had COVID, there you go. Now, I have to say that I am I'm actually amazed by how quickly President Trump has kind of bounced back. And I think that we'll have to continue to watch and say a prayer for that, our president, regarding that. But anyway, certainly COVID does hit at all levels, high and low, everybody in between too, right? But COVID is a serious infection, and we need to be respected for what it is. However, if you want to say a couple happy things about COVID, there's good news, and that is that children, especially young children, are tolerating it really, really well.
Does this mean that they're not getting the virus, or that when they do get it, they beat it?
They don't get it as much. They actually don't have, there are receptors in the nasal passages. We call those ACE2, ACE-2 receptors that the virus kind of attaches itself to. Children don't have as many of them as older kids, and definitely as adults. So it turns out that their propensity to get the infection is lower, okay? And when they happen to get the infection, they're not getting as severe disease. A couple statistics, these are a little bit dated, I apologize. About a month ago, LA Times had an article in the LA Times. Children ages 5 to 17 make up about 17% of the California population. However, only 8% of the cases of COVID have been in this age category. So you can see that it's really half what you would expect, Kyle. Mm-hmm. And at this time, again, these are a little bit dated information, but only one child in California has died as of mid-August. Again, I apologize for the data. I tried to get updated information, couldn't get it. Anyway, one kid in the entire state up to in August had died from COVID-19 between ages 5 and 17. Now that should, listen, folks, that this is a big state. We actually have a very big state. We have like 35 million people, 40 million people who live in California. That should give you all a sense of relief and the feeling that, okay, you're not dealing with something terribly ominous. And that is true. Kids are actually surviving pretty well. They also have smaller lungs. When when a 3-year-old child sneezes, he goes, achoo, achoo.
Yeah.
That's it. Okay. They don't go, achoo, like, right. An adult. I know people who sneeze and they the
room shake.
Yeah. Okay, so there's a difference. They're not that far from the ground. They're this tall. They're that big. Okay, kids are short, and so unless you kind of get down and kind of get dirty with them, they're at your knees, and when they go achoo, they're not shooting it into the room. It's landing on the floor because they're closer to the floor. All right. So they really are not the super spreaders that people have worried about. And that is a big deal. In fact, listen, children are not the ones spreading this infection. They're really not. I'm talking about children, young children. Now, when they get to be teenagers, okay, things change, and you know that. And frankly, we're seeing it right now in the colleges around the country. These kids are going back to college, and what's happening? Well, college kids are college kids, right? What do they do? What do they do?
Get together in big groups, have these parties, and everybody walks away with coronavirus.
That's correct.
Right.
And do they wear a mask?
Sometimes, actually, I've been on several college campuses lately that have enforced the mask rules pretty stringently, but I think by choice, nobody really does.
I'm talking about, Kyle, when they walk into the party, when they're going to a party or they're going to their friend's house.
No, typically not in that environment, no.
No, when they're having dinner together and hanging out, they're not going to wear a mask.
Right. If
they're out and about walking between classes, okay, they're going to put the mask on because they don't want to be singled out. But I guarantee you, when they shut the door, they take their mask down, and I think we all know that. So anyway, but bottom line is, older kids, teenagers, and definitely young adults like college kids they definitely are they do get the infection. But for younger kids are not the super spreaders. So that's a take-home lesson. Okay, so that's the good news about coronavirus and kids. Mm-hmm. And yes, there is this thing called the MIS-C, which is the multi-system inflammatory syndrome that is happening in children. It's a Kawasaki-like situation that can cause inflammation of the coronary arteries of the heart. Listen, this is worrisome. Again, this is extremely rare, Kyle, and I will tell you that it's treatable. So even when you get it, you can actually treat these kids, and you can ameliorate and even avoid the potential coronary artery complications.
Do we know what the occurrence rate is for those complications in children with coronavirus?
They're tiny. I mean, we're talking about, there have been thousands of cases of coronavirus in kids. Okay, but in terms of the numbers of this MIS-C phenomenon, it really has been relatively low. It does have a little different dynamic. You know, when you think about Kawasaki's, you usually think about children under 5, you know, a young, relatively early age category. The kids who are getting this MIS-C condition are actually older kids. They're like 9, 10, 11. That's the average age that they are. So a little bit older. They're also more minority. A lot of these kids are actually of some of them Puerto Rican, Jamaican. It's a very interesting dynamic that some of the minorities seem to be getting this at a higher level. So it is a similar to Kawasaki's, but not Kawasaki's. Okay, so that's kids and COVID. So yes, we have to take it seriously, but for kids, that it isn't as bad as it is in adults. So that kind of segues into my next point I want to make. And I am mindful of our time here. I'm watching our time. But for kids going back to school, I mean, listen, because they're not heavily impacted by the infection. And by the way, let me say one thing, Kyle. I don't care if kids get the infection. I don't. I'm more concerned about kids dying and people dying and of the infection than actually getting it. And so when people kind of throw up this thing where we're having all these cases of COVID, I kind of go, okay, that doesn't bother me. I mean, it doesn't. My daughter got COVID. I wasn't overly concerned about it. She got better. She was about your age, Kyle. She got better. And guess what? She's fine. I do worry about older people getting it because they have a high morbidity. So I'm concerned about not cases. I'm concerned about mortality and to a degree morbidity. There are people who get COVID and then they, for whatever reason, they have ongoing, respiratory issues and other things. And this is why we have to use common sense and have a little bit of concern about this infection. But kids going back to the issue of school, kids can go back to school. They really can. We have to use creativity. We can't be lazy. The teachers need to kind of think about how to do it. But they really could go back, and if there are a number of different criterion that have been put out by the CDC, like about 20 or 30 of them, which are really good recommendations. By the way, the head of the CDC, a guy named Dr. Redfield, is all about kids going back to school. The president of the American Academy of Pediatrics has put out statements very clearly indicating the kids should go back to school as well. So
are individuals within the medical community that don't advocate kids going back to school? Is there any split consensus at all?
There really isn't. I mean, when you look at the what they all say, they hedge that. They say they need to safely go back to school. So they kind of, there's nobody, every pediatrician I know in the community says, look, they agree with me, really. But they always put in the caveat, but we need to do it safely.
Right.
Look, I'm not trying to do it unsafely, okay?
Right.
I'm all about being safe. But it can be done. But you have to it takes maybe a little bit of wisdom. It takes a little bit of thought. You have to maybe divide the day in half or whatever. But let me say this, okay? And I wrote an article in the Wall Street Journal that was published mid-May about kids going back to school. And basically, I mentioned some of the things I've already said, but here's the bottom line, Kyle. Kids are not learning in school right now. This online Zoom education, simply, it doesn't work.
No.
And it doesn't work because we're human beings and we need each other. We need to be, together. And when it comes to education, especially younger children, they don't have the capacity to really focus in and do a good job at it. And they get distracted, they get bored, they walk away from their computers. And so it is not an effective way of educating children. We all know that. It's been proven. It was proven last spring when everything shut down in March, the entire country shut down. And the last quarter of the academic year, the spring quarter of the year, the kids fell behind. But there's more to it than that. There's also this idea of the digital divide. This is a real phenomenon. There are many homes in the country that are low income. They don't have access to high-speed internet. They don't have fancy computers. They're not logging onto your show today, Kyle. They're not hearing us. They're not hearing us talk. Okay, and you know why? Because they don't have what a lot of other people have. So that digital divide, which should bother everybody, really, is becoming deepened. It's getting deeper, and that's a problem. And in LA in particular, I can tell you, LA Unified School District, 80% of the LA Unified School kids are of Latin, are Hispanic. So, and a lot of these kids are poor. A lot of these kids do not have high-speed internet. They don't have computers, for that matter. So that digital divide is getting deeper. And frankly, and another very important part of this is the psychological damage, I guess you could call it, that is going on. And kids they're feeling separated. They're feeling isolated. They're going into depression. Depression has increased by about 300% year to year, year 2019 to 2020, in terms of this period. Anxiety has increased by about 400%, and suicidal ideation, in other words, thinking about killing yourself, which is never a good thing, is up about 100%. Okay.
What's the current rate of suicidal ideation among minors?
Yeah, I don't know that number. I should know it, but I don't know it. But it is, look, a lot of kids think about suicide when they're going through their teens because they get depressed, they get overwhelmed, like their boyfriend breaks up with them or their girlfriend, whatever. We know that they kind of tangentially think about it. The number of kids who actually try it is actually not that many, but it does happen. But the idea that people are young kids, double the number are thinking about ending their life.
Yeah.
How do you, that's tragic.
So why do you think it is that suicidal ideation is up, depression is up, anxiety is up, children aren't learning, children aren't that susceptible to virus to begin with, low-income children are suffering the worst, and in the face of all of these statistics and all these facts, this has become a politicized issue? There seems to be broad medical consensus, but not broad popular consensus. Why do you think that is?
Kyle, there are imponderables that I can't answer. I can give you a couple of thoughts, and I will do that. But I will tell you the tragedy for me is that it has become politicized.
Right.
And I will tell you, and I said this in a press conference we gave in Washington, D.C. a couple months ago. This really has to do with unions and teachers' unions I'm talking about. And the fact that I hate to say this, but I think they're kind of taking advantage of the perfect storm here. And let me give you I'll put some teeth to that. Our local teachers in the LA Unified School District here are represented by a union called the UTLA, which stands for United Teachers of Los Angeles. Okay, UTLA put out a white paper in the spring talking about their demands and what kind of demands they would want to go back to educating in person. You would think that those demands would be things like adequate PPE, which is personal protection equipment, and maybe a pay raise or something like that. Those were included in the demands, but they also had demands like, number one, defunding the police. Now, I don't know about you guys in Minnesota.
Doesn't work so well here, I'll tell you that.
It doesn't really have much to do with education, does it?
Yeah.
How about this one? Homeless, they're funding, okay? They want to fund homelessness, in other words, get the homeless people off the street. Now, okay, there are a few homeless children for sure who live with their families. I think that they inflate the numbers, but anyway, there are those kids in Los Angeles. But to have a blanket statement to provide homeless shelters for all the homeless, who don't want to go there all the time, by the way, that to me seems to be a little bit on kind of out of the educational, sphere as
Outside their
well.
purview. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it kind of seems to be a bigger thing. How about this one? To demand that all charter schools be closed. Now, do you know what charter schools are already having back there in Minnesota?
Of course. Yeah, yeah. We've got some charter schools here.
Okay. Well, charter schools are basically public schools which are under the aegis of the public system, but they're usually taught by non-union teachers. Okay,
Yeah.
and the unions hate them.
They can't compete with them. They're too good.
You're correct there too.
Yeah.
I mean, people, the poor parents who in these communities are dying to get into charter schools, and the unions literally despise them because I hate to say it, but they're really showing them up, right? So anyway, that was another thing that they were going to close all charter schools. Again, to me, that's very counter productive in my mind. If you're talking about education and enhancing the education of kids. So basically it is becoming, I think, a standoff to a degree between the teachers' unions and the school district. And the school district and the teachers' unions, unfortunately, kind of go hand in hand because the teachers' unions exert a tremendous amount of influence on who gets elected to the educational board. Okay, so they're kind of one of the same. So those are the things that I think are kind of pushing this into a political arena.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Where it's reached a stalemate, unfortunately. And I know that a lot of parents and some of our viewers are concerned right now if this stalemate continues to drag on. What sort of measures should they implement in dealing with their children to mitigate some of the negative factors you just discussed? And I think you're kind of the man to answer that question. How should parents handle online school?
Well, what they probably should do, and I'm encouraging my families here, is to get into a pod. Okay, the new educational pods are small, 5, maybe 10 kids at a time, kind of gathering together, like aged children, finding a teacher, hiring a teacher if they can afford to do it. But if you pool your resources and hire 1/10 of a teacher, like a tutor, maybe not, and frankly, if you have a good teacher, you can do a lot of education in 3 to 4 hours. Okay, and literally meeting together in a home, in a backyard, at a park somewhere, and these kids can get educated. And I have to tell you, a lot of people in California, a lot of the families in California are doing exactly that. We call it potting up out here in California, and they're doing that. And they're hiring teachers, private teachers or tutors, whatever you want to call them, and they're educating their kids in that way.
So would that fall under sort of the guise of homeschooling?
It really is. It's a brother to it. It's not exactly the same as homeschooling. Homeschooling, you think of as being more of a mother or father doing the teaching. This is more of a professional educator, a teacher who's actually kind of gathering around them the little chicks around them and teaching. But that's more of a paid person as opposed to a parent.
Yeah, that's very interesting. How many people, I mean, I'm kind of putting you on the spot for a number here, but how common do you think this is in California? Because I haven't seen it at all in Minnesota yet.
It's definitely happening. I would say literally there are thousands in LA who are doing this. And what is happening, and I hope the UTLA people and the LA Unified School District people are hearing me, but they're going to lose the confidence of the population. And if people had options, I guarantee you they would be pulling their kids out of school, and they will. And this is something that the state education system needs to realize, that people can only handle so much of this stuff, and then they're gonna look for alternatives, because I think that I know that people are very committed to their children's education.
That's a fascinating option. I'm still very fascinated with this pod idea. I haven't heard of it before. Do you know where our viewers could go to find more resources on this?
If they go online, Kyle, if they look at educational pods, this has been talked about in Washington D.C. as well. Betsy DeVos, I think, has commented about this. She's our Secretary of Education, and other people. But this is not a unknown phenomenon, but it's actually an incredible alternative to what is going on right now. That's for sure.
Speaking of what's going on right now, even when kids end up back in school, there's all these protective measures implemented. You've got kids socially distanced, you've got kids wearing masks. How much of
Yep.
this do you think is necessary? And is there any downside to things like, kids wearing masks or socially distancing?
Well, I don't think there's a huge downside of kids wearing masks. I mean, it's kind of hard for the younger kids to do it. The older kids can do it. That's fine. Listen, Kyle, I don't care what you do. I don't care if you even swab the kids every day, twice a day. I don't care. The important thing, and sorry, if I had kids, I'd make them do it. The important thing is they need each other. They need to socialize. They need to get back to some kind of semblance of normalcy. If it requires wearing a mask, then wear a mask. I don't care. Do I think that they work? Are they going to be that efficacious in obliterating COVID-19 transmission? The answer is no. I don't think they are. Right. Especially younger children. What do younger children do? They sit there and they touch the mask all day long. They're taking them off. They're putting them on. I think the efficiency of younger children is pretty low. But if it required wearing a mask, by all means, do it. I don't care. The important thing is getting kids back into an educational system. And also, frankly, you have to realize that whether you like to admit it or not, schools are a place where parents can put their kids while they go to work.
Yeah, there's an economic component there for sure.
Gigantic economic component. And if you have to stay at home and monitor your kids' educational experiences online, and you have to do that for younger children. Listen, I have grandchildren, and I know my children and my daughter-in-law and my daughter are having a tough time, monitoring this educational experience. But when you put them in school, you put them in school. Then you can go to work, you can go about your day, whatever you're doing. But by the way, it just FYI, this too is impacting women and the workforce. A lot of women are in the workforce nowadays. But right now, in terms of the whole COVID thing, this is really causing there to be a step backwards for, parity for women in the workforce. We talk about that a lot. There's a lot of noise about that. And people, like to demand, parity in the workforce with women. And obviously, this is something that is important. But it is definitely impacting women in the workforce as well.
That's a very good point. For those of our viewers who are just tuning in, this is Dr. Robert Hamilton, a Santa Monica-based pediatrician, author of 7 Secrets of the Newborn, host of his own podcast, The Hamilton Review, where kids and culture collide. We're having him on right now to discuss children and the coronavirus. A third thing I want to talk about, Doctor, is the experiences you have had in the media and in the internet and with YouTube and social media platforms since you started talking about this stuff. Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So, a couple of things I've done. Number one, I did write an article that was published in the Wall Street Journal. That was fine. That wasn't a huge deal. I have been on a couple of appearances with Laura Ingraham to talk about this. And Laura, it's funny because some people do not like Fox News. They look at it as being the devil. I don't know what to say about that. But anyway, when people, the reason I went on Laura's show is she asked me to go on the show. The reason, Kyle, I'm on your show today is because you asked me to be on your show. Okay.
Right.
When MSNBC or anybody else, CNN, if they want me to be on their show, guess what, Kyle? I'll be on the show.
Yeah, that's how media works.
And I'm gonna say the same thing every time, everywhere I go. I kind of say the same thing. I want you to know that it isn't like I'm changing my tune for CNN or anyway. So anyway, I did go on Laura's show. Some people really said nasty things about that because they go, "How can you dare go on her show?" And I said, "Because she asked me." But what happened, which really kind of got things going, was I was part of a group. We went back to Washington, D.C. in the later part of July. And we gave a press conference in front of the Supreme Court. The name of the group was the First Line Physicians. And we had a press conference in front of the Supreme Court. We were going to go in front of the Capitol building, but John Lewis's body was being placed in if you remember John Lewis, Congressman Lewis, who
Yeah,
passed in July, and they put his body, they laid his body in state in the rotunda of the Capitol. So anyway, we moved to the Supreme Court, in front of the Supreme Court, as a backdrop, I guess. And so we had this press conference. And so I spoke again about exactly what I just said. Basically, the kids, it's important that kids get back to school. Other people in that press conference talked about, it was a group of doctors, they talked about hydroxychloroquine and the value of hydroxychloroquine in treating COVID-19. That video, and there was one particular individual who really kind of got very kind of down and dirty on this whole thing, and saying some nasty things about Fauci, and saying that hydroxychloroquine is a cure for COVID-19, which I don't believe, by the way. And there may be some benefit, but I don't think it's a cure. And I don't, as a doctor, I don't use the word cure very often. So I respect that word. Anyway, that was the word that was used. So that video went bonkers. It literally within hours, I think there were 17 million hits on that thing. I think it broke a record of some sorts. And it turned out that Google took it down, YouTube took it down. Our President Trump, actually put it up twice on his Twitter channel. They took it down twice. His son put it up one time, Don Jr., and they took it down again. So clearly the powers that be out there, whoever these people are at Facebook and Google and everywhere else, they did not, Twitter, they did not want this video to go around. Okay, well, I was part of that video. So I got a tremendous amount of heat when I got back to California. Mm-hmm. I got called a lot of names. People told me I needed to retire, told me I was anti-science. Some people called me a quack. Some people called my office and said, is Dr. Hamilton a real doctor? Which, I don't know.
You got the lab coat. I believe it.
I got a white coat. Look at it. I do have a doctorate degree. I actually went to medical school. I went to UCLA. I was the chief resident of the pediatric at UCLA. I was actually the president of the LA Pediatric Society. So I do have credentials to prove that I am a real doctor. But anyway, so that, but I found this to be, to a degree, comical. But not so comical, because there were some really nasty things that were said to my younger doctors who I practice with, and they don't really listen. To their credit, they weren't, when they joined my practice, which is called Pacific Ocean Pediatrics. Listen, they weren't. I didn't tell them that I was going to be going, having viral videos that were going to be down, and that they were going to be subjected to a lot of nasty comments. That wasn't part of my employment agreement with them. Okay. And I'm laughing, but I'm not laughing, because it was actually pretty painful for.
Well, the left isn't very tolerant once they decide they disagree with you. This happens all the time to people in media, my friends and I, and I'm sure it happened on a much larger scale to you after that video. It's horrible how vicious these people can be.
It was painful, and some things were, listen, I've been in practice for a long time. It isn't like I personally read everything that people say, and when people, call my office and swear and leave a message, which is horrific. I mean, you should hear what people were saying. Basically, I don't listen to the whole thing. I kind of go, okay, an angry voice, I'll put that one down, okay? Right. But, I got some emails which would blow your mind, and other phone calls that were likewise not kind. So, rather than actually hearing my words, I got kind of lumped together with this group. You were part of a group of, doctors who don't know what they're talking about. Actually, truth be told, that group of doctors are a very thoughtful, very, very amazing group of individuals. I got to know them all. This gal who, one individual who did speak out against Fauci like that, I actually don't know her. I met her that day of the conference, just FYI. Yeah. But anyway, all that to say is that, yeah, it's been pretty ugly. Here's the thing though, Kyle, You alluded to a video that I did 4.5 years ago.
Yeah.
And that video was called How to Calm a Crying Baby.
Very non-political. Seems like it's just in line with your work as a pediatrician.
Yeah, it really is. And I will tell you, there have been, like you said, there have been millions of people. Actually, the number is 45 million. It's a big number. And I have heard people from all around the world say, "Oh, I saw your video. It was on TV in Israel or Argentina or Poland or Greece." I'm making up. I'm thinking about the Netherlands. Okay, Canada. New Zealand. Okay, so people all around the world saw that. And you're right, Kyle. This is look. I'm a pediatrician. Okay, I'm showing people how to calm a baby, and that has been helpful, to a lot of people. So suddenly I get an email from YouTube saying, your video, How to Calm a Crying Baby, we have pulled your video. We have taken that off. And because it does not meet our community standards. Okay, now mind you, this is a video, and those of you who are listening, friends who are listening, this is a video that's been up for 4.5 years.
Right.
I'm monetized. I get a check every month from Google. Okay. Mm-hmm. Suddenly, out of the blue, is now doesn't meet their community standards, and I mean, if that felt like a little bit like a slap in the face to me, I have to say, and I'm being honest. All that to say, look, there was you could appeal it. I have a publicist who appealed it immediately, and we got it put back up. But I think that, and I'll ask you, Kyle, how would you receive that if you got that kind of, after 4.5 years, suddenly, yes, you were back in Washington, D.C. You were part of a group that, got pulled down by YouTube and Google, all these people. How would you interpret that, them taking down my other video?
Well, I would say that they probably didn't find some sort of egregious content that's been hiding in this massively viral monetized video for the last 5 years. I would say it's more than likely related to your political appearance. And this is something we see all the time on YouTube and Twitter and Facebook, is people who have successful pieces of content or a well-developed profile all of a sudden getting knocked off the air after they say something the tech censors disapprove of. And this is an especially egregious example.
Kyle, that's a great, that's exactly what I concluded too. Matter of fact, thank you for saying you took the words out of my mouth. Thank you. That's what I thought too. I thought, you know what? Here's what I thought. They were kind of going like this. You're going, Hamilton, we know who you are. It was
a shot across the bow. They want you to shut up.
They're saying to me this. They're saying, you know what? There's a new sheriff in town. We're the sheriff, and we want you to know that. And we'll put you back up. I know you have the appeal process. We'll put you back up. And we did, and they did. And we asked them, what criterion did we broach? In other words, they said it doesn't meet our community standards. Okay, well, that's their verbiage. But I didn't ever understand they didn't really explain to us what community standards suddenly we had broached in our How to Calm a Crying Baby video. Okay, I mean, that seems to me like, okay, listen, I'm not teaching people how to make bombs.
Yeah,
I'm not doing that. I am talking to people. I'm talking to mothers and fathers with newborn babies and trying to help them. And so it spoke volumes to me, and I think those of you who are listening and watching tonight, wherever you may be, listen, I think you should take it to heart, because you hear about this, Kyle. I've heard about cancel culture. We all do. You've experienced it sounds like. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. If you look hard enough, long enough, my address, all my personal information is online somewhere. It happens.
Yeah. But when you run into it and you actually experience it, you kind of feel, I have to say, I felt very vulnerable.
Absolutely, because you've got this mob of people. You don't know who they are. You don't know them from Adam, but they're sending this deluge of, hateful messages. They're threatening you. They're threatening your family, and they're anonymous. They can have anonymity within the mob. The big tech will protect them, and then big tech will hammer you. And it's definitely an isolating, dark experience that's had a lot of negative outcomes for people that aren't prepared for it.
Yeah, and listen, I was getting phone calls from non-patients. These are not people that I know. They're people from Texas and people from Florida. And, these are, I mean, people that they have, all they want to do is complain and make me, and hurt me. They're trying to hurt me.
Yeah.
And so, listen, I think that this is something that I'm not sure there's a solution to this, but that's what I got for really, and that's what I got for speaking up about kids going back to school. Now, I think also it was because I was linked together with this particular group, and some of them were advocating, hydroxychloroquine, and some of them got kind of down and dirty. Listen, I hear things on TV these days that blow my mind. Things that words that 4-letter words that you kind of go, wow, we didn't say that on TV in days gone by. I want you to know that. And so you kind of hear things, and suddenly you would think that people, why they would take these videos down. This is not like vulgar content.
Right.
It's a different point of view, and maybe not the orthodox point of view on certain situations, but it isn't like, I'm surprised by how much power these groups, these companies, really is what they are. They're private companies. How much power they wield.
You make a very good point. It seems like the amount of vulgarity that's tolerable in public life knows no bounds. You've got Netflix with their new movie Cuties. Thankfully, that's faced a lot of resistance. You've got, violence and sexual content and profane language galore on every corner of the internet. I'm sure if you go on YouTube, you can find videos about how to make a bomb. And then here you are saying something that slightly deviates from the narrative, and your video on how to calm, a crying child gets removed from the internet. It's to the point where it is truly absurd. And I'm so glad we could have somebody on who's experienced that. Obviously, though, you haven't been daunted. You're here on the show. You're still doing media appearances, correct?
I have trimmed my wings a little bit. Not because of me, but I needed to kind of quell the storm within my coworkers, and I wanted to, listen. As an individual, private individual, I can say what I want to say, but I also realize that I represent my corporation, Pacific Ocean Pediatrics, and sometimes people look at me. Although I will say, Kyle, that they sometimes judge without knowing what I've said. I'm not trying to be unreasonable in my comments. I'm also trying to be as careful about what I say as I can, but speak truth. And there are people who just don't want to hear what I have to say. They simply judge. They prejudge basically, and that isn't fair.
Yeah, the left speaks out against prejudice, but they're the ones doing the most prejudging. I find that fairly ironic.
It is indeed true. Yep.
Absolutely. It looks like we're coming down to the end of time here, Doctor. But before we go, is there anything else that you want to leave us with on the topic of cancel culture, of children and coronavirus, or any other matter?
Nothing other than I think that, listen, I think we're going to get through this. I am hopeful. I am bullish that, there are some good things. I think the incredible how well our president has done should buoy everybody, whether you're on the left or the right or where you stand politically. This is amazing that he's 74 years of age, and he has really, he has been allowed, the best treatment, of course, that we can give anybody, which is rightfully the way it should be. But this is encouraging. And so I think that, listen, my hope and prayer is that we make it through the COVID. I'm looking forward to normalcy. And I'm hoping for a safe and fair election too. So, I don't know. I'm not sure what to say about it. That's a whole different can of worms, but we won't go there. But anyway, I thank you all for your attention. It's been great to be with you, Kyle.
Of course, absolutely. For those of us who are just tuning in, you can always go back on the Alpha News Facebook page, watch the archive version of this stream. Very last thing, Doctor, where can people find your podcast, and where can they buy your book?
You can buy my book at Amazon.com. It's out there. Write a nice review if you like it. I like that. We like reviews. And you can find me on my podcast. My podcast is entitled The Hamilton Review. The subtitle is Where Kids and Culture Collide. We oftentimes talk about things relevant to children, but Kyle, here's the deal. Anything you can think of in the world is relevant to children.
That's true.
Trust me. I can make the spin. I can guarantee you that. So anyway, love to have people join us on the podcast and pick up my book. Love that. I'd be honored by that.
Absolutely. Again, this has been Dr. Hamilton tuning in from California. We appreciate you being here tonight.
You are welcome. Okay. Take care, everyone.